are back on Turning the Tide with Ben Cohen. He is an expert on the Middle East. He's a contributor to the Huffington Post, PJTV, and a host of other places. He's on CNN and Fox News quite often. And Ben, welcome back. Now, I brought up, thank you, and I brought up just before the break what was going on with the Israeli prisoner swap, and my own opinion that it was a very bad idea and set a very bad precedence, which I think is proven by the fact that a Saudi Arabia cleric and then one of the royal family put up $1 million bounty on any Israeli soldier's head so that soldier can be used for barter in exchange for Saudi Arabia prisoners. So tell me exactly what happened, how it happened, and what is going to be the end result.
Well, the origin of this was the kidnapping on Israeli territory in June 2006 of a young Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. And Gilad basically spent over 5 years as a captive of Hamas in Gaza. He was not allowed access to the Red Cross. We saw him once in a video the entire 5 years of his captivity. So he was kept in the most appalling conditions. Gilad, I'm delighted to say, for his family at least, was released last month, and earlier this month, and is now back at home with his family in Israel. Now, in exchange, Israel released 1,027 imprisoned, convicted Palestinian terrorists in exchange for the one life of Gilad Shalit. And that brought forth a very anguished public debate. Was this the right thing to do? Yes, it speaks volumes about Israel that it holds one life so precious that it will exchange over 1,000 terrorists for it. But what does to save that life? But what is what are going to be the ramifications of that? It's not, by the way, the first time Israel has done this. In 1985, during the war in Lebanon, Israel exchanged, I think it was about 1,500 Palestinian prisoners for 2 of its soldiers. So there's a precedent here, and Arab terrorist organizations know that if they kidnap an Israeli soldier, that Israel has established a pattern where it will make a deal and release, basically the ratio is 1 to 1,000. If you kidnap one soldier, you can expect to get at least 1,000 prisoners in any exchange. Now, does this make sense is the question. Because, of course, most of these terrorists can return to terrorist activity. And in the case of the Gilad Shalit exchange, we had some of the most heinous terrorists being released, including the woman that drove a suicide bomber to a pizza restaurant in Jerusalem in 2002, who then blew herself up in that restaurant and took dozens of innocent people with her. I think the argument that there are several arguments either way. I think one that I found persuasive, and I think here is where I might disagree with you, Candace, because I know you think it was a bad idea, and on balance, I think it was something that was worth doing.
Well, let me just say, Ben, that you are right. It does speak volumes for Israel. And do I think the life of one Israeli soldier is worth over 1,000 terrorists? Oh, without question. But as you referred to earlier, and as I have stated, the danger that it places the rest of the Israeli military in is my concern. So go ahead.
But what I was going to say is that, you see, if you go to Israel, it's very clear that the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, which is a conscript army, everybody serves in the army in Israel. They are in the front line of defending the state of Israel. They are the ones who are having to go after Hamas terrorists in Gaza. They're the ones that are having to go after Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's an army that has fought 2 very difficult wars in the last 5 years, against Hezbollah in Lebanon in 2006, against Hamas in Gaza in 2009. So when you have an army in that situation, one of the key things is morale. Napoleon famously said that you can't expect an army to fight on an empty stomach. I think you also can't expect an army to fight on an empty heart. And what I think Israel has done by securing Gilad's release is to say to all those young soldiers that are going out defending the country day after day, we care about you, we love you, we will never leave you. If you are taken hostage, even in the darkest days, remember Gilad Shalit and know that there is someone out there fighting for your freedom, and we will do what we can to release you. Now, that, I think, has a great deal of moral value, but it also has a great deal of strategic value. It helps to motivate soldiers to fight, and it helps them to understand that their country really does care about them, that they are not going to be...
Go ahead.
Yeah, that they're not going to be like pieces on a chessboard, as funnily enough, these Palestinian terrorists are.
Well, let me ask this. If he was just in the Gaza Strip, why didn't Israel, the Mossad or the military, go in and just get him out?
Because I'll tell you, Candace, it's not that easy. And we had a very tragic example of this back in 1994. A soldier was kidnapped and taken to Gaza. Excuse me. And his name was Nachshon Wachsman. And there was a military operation to release Nachshon, and Nachshon was killed during that operation. The point is that there was never going to be any guarantee that an Israeli rescue mission, if they could find him, even if they found the location where he was being held, would be successful. And I think it was rightly a risk that the Israelis were not prepared to take. You can have, when you're trying to preemptively assassinate terrorist leaders, as Israel sometimes does, you can take a few more risks. But I think that when one of your soldiers is in the firing line, you have to play it absolutely 100% cautiously.
I do understand that. I really do. I just, the Mossad is the top intelligence agency in the world.
Yeah,
I
but
believe, and the toughest. I don't know why they just couldn't send in a couple of agents and in the cover of night and take him out.
It's not that easy in Gaza. It's not that easy.
I know.
And also, the Mossad is not one of the things that gives the Mossad an edge is that they don't divulge either their operations or the details of those operations. So we don't know that they didn't try that and not see. Yeah.
Good point. Very good point. Well, and now the second part of this. The Saudi Arabia cleric who issued a $100,000 bounty on any Israeli soldier's head, and then the royal, and there's so many of them, I don't remember which one it was, he's not in power, added $900,000 to that a couple of days ago. And so now there's $1 million on any Israeli soldier's head. So was it worth it?
Look, if another Israeli soldier is kidnapped, obviously we are put in the same position that we were with Gilad Shalit. I don't think that if we had left Gilad to die in Hamas captivity, that Israeli soldiers would be less at risk as a result of being kidnapped. I think they face the same risk of kidnapping whether or not Israel negotiates for the release of someone like Gilad Shalit. I think the problem that you have here, let me just tell you a little bit about this Saudi cleric. He's actually a prince of the Saudi royal family, Khalid bin Talal, who is, as you correctly say, Candace, topped up that reward or that incentive to $1 million with his $900,000. Khalid bin Talal is not that well known. Unlike his brother. His brother is a man named Al-Walid bin Talal, and Prince Al-Walid is very well known in the United States. He is the person who offered a donation to the survivors of 9/11 immediately after the atrocities of 2001 that was quite rightly turned down by Rudy Giuliani when he was then the mayor of New York. Since that time, Al-Walid bin Talal, again, the brother of the man who's offering a bounty on the head of Israeli soldiers, has funded at one of America's most prestigious universities, Georgetown University, the Center, and I'm not kidding you here, the Center for Muslim Christian Understanding.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. So actually, this is a connection that needs to be brought out, because one brother is using American universities to push an absolute fake message of Muslim Christian understanding and tolerance. The other brother is proposing and financing the most savage, barbaric, primitive measures to punish Israeli soldiers for the crime of defending their country.
Just for the crime of being.
Exactly, for the crime of being there. And the fact is that this bounty has, I think, boosted the spirits of those in the Arab world who want to commit acts of terrorism. And sadly, I'm not just including Hezbollah and Hamas there. I'm also including the chairman of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, who is seen by this administration, by most European governments, and to be fair, even by the Bush administration as a moderate. He gave Abbas an interview last week where he basically repeated that he would not recognize Israel as a Jewish state. He also said on the issue of Gilad Shalit, Hamas captured a soldier and managed to keep him for 5 years, and that is a good thing. And he thinks it's a good thing because none of the Palestinian factions want to negotiate in good faith with Israel. They basically want to negotiate from a position of power, as they did with Gilad Shalit. They want to force Israel to concede. And so this simply means that Israel is going to have to be extra vigilant now in the coming weeks and months from this when it comes to this very real threat.
Yeah, well, it's insane what's going on, and that brings me to Benjamin Netanyahu at the UN and Palestine applying for statehood. And I was trying to get the name of the department. This is making me crazy. I couldn't. Oh, here it is. Okay, the name of the department or agency within the UN, which is a cultural and educational.
UNESCO, yeah, UNESCO, yeah.
Yeah, they have recognized Palestine as a state.
Yeah, but what they've recognized, it doesn't really exist as a state. I mean, it's arguably Palestine is now an example of the world's first virtual state. I think there are two things here to remember: that Palestine could have actually been a real state. When Ehud Barak was prime minister in the last days of Bill Clinton's presidency, there was a deal on the table that Yasser Arafat could have taken and didn't. It would have given him 96% of the West Bank. Under the Bush administration, Ehud Olmert, who was the prime minister of Israel, offered Abbas a very similar deal. It would have given him 97% of the West Bank. It would have allowed the Palestinians to control the Muslim holy places in East Jerusalem. Again, they didn't want this deal. What they would rather do is pursue negotiations from a standpoint where they're undermining Israel. So they believe that if an organization like UNESCO admits Palestine as a member and recognizes Palestinian independence, that puts Israel on the wrong side of the law internationally. And if Israel's on the wrong side of international law, whatever you understand that to be, then Israel is in trouble. So this is extremely counterproductive. I don't frankly expect much from most UN agencies. They tend to be dominated, as the UN itself is, by undemocratic, autocratic, totalitarian regimes. So most of those countries are going to play along with this game. But I think it's the real tragedy here, of course, is that the Palestinians, if they want a state, are never going to get one by engaging in these antics. They're going to have to sit down and they're going to have to negotiate in good faith. Barak offered them a state. Olmert offered them a state. Ariel Sharon, who was historically one of the tougher, more hawkish leaders in Israel, Ariel Sharon was prepared to concede a Palestinian state.
And I am interviewing Ariel Sharon's son later today, Gilad Shalit. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about that, Ben. Believe me.
Right. Well, His father, sadly, is in a coma, was a great man and one of the great leaders of Israel. But Benjamin Netanyahu has also said that he will negotiate for a Palestinian state. So you have to assume that when the Palestinians don't sit down at those negotiations, that they have an ulterior motive. And I think you nailed what that is, Candace. They want a situation where Israel is no longer there.
Yes, they want the complete eradication of Israel, and they want the eradication of all of the Arab world, of the United States. And so, you and I have spoken before how Jews and Christians have really got to combine and join together in this effort of Islam to remove all religious freedom from the face of the earth. And I agree with what you said, that this is something that has to be done. And it's why I remain so intrigued, interested, and heartfelt towards the situation that Israel is in the Middle East. It is their biblical homeland. There's no question of that. And it was so long before Islam ever came around. And so it is something that I find I have a great amount of respect for Benjamin Netanyahu, just a tremendous amount. And I watch the mess that they're in right now, and it seems as if Israel is in a lose-lose situation. They can't make everyone happy, so in my opinion, they ought to look to their own defense, and if attacked, they should respond.
I think you're right. I think that is the situation that Israel finds itself in. I think that it's in the position where it can't make, even if it wanted to, concessions, because there's nobody to make those concessions to, and they would be misinterpreted. They would be seen as a sign of weakness rather than as a sign of generosity. So I think that what Israel is basically doing is practicing a policy of containment against the rest of the Arab world. And I think that long term, the really difficult dilemma that Israel is dealing with is, how can we remain stable, secure, prosperous, connected when we're located in a region and in a culture that doesn't think we have a right to exist? I don't see Israel resolving that dilemma anytime soon, but I think that it has a very motivated population. It has a disciplined, very brave set of armed forces. It has an extremely dynamic economy. In fact, their credit rating was just upgraded again 2 weeks ago, which is astounding when you consider the kind of environment, regional environment that Israel exists in. And I think that, but one of the things that I would recommend that Israel does is try and explore more the nature of alliances with other people. And I think that, Israelis tend to be very grateful for the support they've had from American Christians. And that's a strong relationship and one that we all hope will continue. But I also think that as Jews struggle with this, to understand this idea that Islam cannot tolerate the idea of a separate independent Jewish state, I think Jews can also open their eyes to the issue we discussed at the beginning of the show, which is the persecution of Christians. And these two issues work together. We Jews want to have a state that is safe and secure and recognized in the Middle East. Christians want to be able to worship and practice and believe freely in the Middle East. We are basically united by a drive for tolerance. We want to be tolerated. We, in fact, demand to be tolerated. So I hope that these twin issues will get Jews and Christians in America working together much more closely.
Me too, Ben. And I'm going to just state very quickly, when you said that they demand to be tolerated, forget toleration. You must be respected as human beings. You must be respected for the rights and responsibilities and privileges that you have been given as a human being who walks on the face of the earth. Israel is located within its biblical heartland. It is where it has been for millennia. So do you know what? If the Arabs can't get that, they can just go jump in a lake.
Right, and I think that what the message we need to be getting across is, just as Jews have the right to be in their historic homeland and to have a state there, we want to see a situation where if you're a Christian in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, that you can go to church, and if you're a female Christian, that you can actually drive to church, because Saudi Arabia
that's a whole different matter, Ben.
Saudi Arabia is a country that does not permit the practice of Christianity. So yes, you're right. It's about a lot more than simple tolerance. It's about respect, equal rights, and having those equal rights hammered into tablets of stone.
Absolutely. There is no human being on the face of the earth that has the right to denigrate or remove that humanity from another. It is against God and nature, and it gets my blood boiling, as you know, Ben.
I can tell, Candace. I can hear her.
Yes, I am a staunch and strong supporter of Israel, and you know, the research into Palestine and everything that I have done. Palestine's a made-up place. Palestinians are made-up people. They're just comprised of people from other Arab nations who, for whatever reason, decided they wanted that plot of land. And for me, it is utterly ridiculous that this is continuing on. Israel kicked their butts 6 ways from Sunday back in the Six-Day War, and they have continued to contain them and continued to deal with them through all these decades. And it just makes me crazy that our own president is not standing with Israel. Oh, he says he is, but his actions are completely opposite. And to me, the fate of America is very heavily intertwined with the fate of Israel. I don't ever want to see our two nations turning on one another. And I don't want to see the Western world turn their back on Israel. I believe if that ever happened, as it is prophesied to happen in the Bible, if that ever happens, the world as we know it will end. And I don't mean it's going to blow up. I mean the world that recognizes humanity, that recognizes, here in America, for instance, we recognize the right and privilege of an American citizen to pursue the American dream. And that dream is simply the right to succeed and fail and succeed and fail. And until we get what we have worked so hard for, we're allowed to continue. There is no government entity that is supposed to step in and stop us from achieving that success if we work hard enough for it. And that is something I would like to see pervasive around the entire world. I don't want anyone in any country to be prevented from being who and what they are. My own father was born and raised in Amsterdam and then left there when he was 19. He was World War II happened while he was a child. When he was 4 years old is when Hitler invaded his homeland. And he came to America, and just about 3 or 4 years before he died, a Dutch couple happened to wander through the little farmer's market where he was selling their eggs and milk, you know, my parents' eggs, milk, and bread and yogurt and stuff that my mom makes and sells at the farmer's market. And they asked my dad what he'd been doing. He said, well, I retired and then I was bored, so I started a window washer service. I started with a bucket and a squeegee, and in 6 months, I added a ladder and a long squeegee, and I'm making $6,000 a month. And the couple just looked at him stunned and said, you would never, ever, ever be able to do that in Holland because you're too old. He was 69. And to me, it's a great story. To me, what we have here in America, Ben, is that ability. There's no one telling you you're too old to contribute to society. And I want that for everywhere. And I want that for Israel to be able to live in peace.
I agree. And, you know, I'm a European Jew. I come from England, and I'm very grateful to be living here in America. And because I think that the values that exist here, which you've very cogently summarized, are the values that I identify with. And, you know, what I value most about the United States, and I think that this is one reason why you have this very strong relationship with Israel, is the United States is based on the idea of freedom. And freedom runs through the lifeblood of the United States. And that's something that the Israelis recognize very strongly.
And deserve.
Absolutely.
They absolutely deserve it. Ben, we're coming to the last 5 minutes of the interview, and I am so sad. I think I could talk to you all day. Do you have any last thing you would like to summarize? Like, we haven't talked about what you're up to these days. Is there anything exciting you're up to you want to share with us, or save that for another day?
Well, let's say that I'm actually working, and you and I, Candace, have been talking about this privately. We are trying to develop some new media products around the issue of persecution of Christians globally. I think the plight of Christians now has to become an agenda issue in much the same way that the civil rights movement here was in the 60s, or the campaign for the freedom of Jews in the Soviet Union in the 70s, or anti-apartheid in South Africa in the 80s. This is one of those issues. And so, when I've got a bit of flesh on the bone of this idea, I would love to come back and talk to you about it a bit more.
Oh, absolutely. I'm quite excited with what you brought to me, and I have to all my listeners, I have told Ben whatever is within my power, I will help with, because it's a fabulous project. Ben, thank you so much for joining me.
And thank you, Candace, for having me on today.
Absolutely. Anytime that you have a message or something you want to talk about, you just give me a call. You have my number, and we'll get you on, because to me, what is going on in the Middle East is something that is going to affect America and the Western world greatly as it progresses or digresses, which I guess digress would be the proper term there. And so thank you. Thank you so much. Good luck with everything that you're doing, and we will talk again soon.
Talk soon, Candace. Be well. Bye-bye.
You too. Be well. Bye-bye.